Leaders are the people that have the most ability to impact the biggest number of people. So then the question really becomes, how could workplace culture not be important? If you want to drive better performance, however you measure that in your organization, maybe it's financial, maybe it's number of subscribers, maybe whatever you offer, if you want to drive better outcomes, you've got to have a good workplace culture. Culture is much more than words on a page. You know, if you go into many organizations, you go into their lobbies, you know, this is our vision, this is our mission, this is our culture, these are our values. That's great, and there's some importance to keeping those front and center. But it's much more about what you described. What happens when things get tough? How do people behave then? It requires an emotional connection.
This story is of an Indian company, Stage. The founders had a company that was shut down within a night. How's life going with the Shift Advisory Group?
It's
the new
going,
venture.
It's going busily, quite busy, but very good. I'm very grateful for how things have gone in the first 7 months in business, and I'm looking forward to continuing to grow and learn and expand.
How does it feel like from corporate world to enter the business world, from your own company?
It's different for sure. You know, I would say there's lots getting used to. Ironically, I was a consultant for 8 years earlier in my career, so it's not completely unusual. I also had my own business when I was really young, so I guess I've had some entrepreneurial sense within me always. But look, I'll be honest, it's been an adjustment. You know, part of it has been the sales cycle, that it takes a long time, that you and I might meet, you might seem interested, and then I'm thinking you're going to call me back within 2 weeks, and 2 weeks becomes 4 weeks, becomes 6 weeks, becomes 3 months. Part of it is email, just email volume. You know, I used to get hundreds every day. Now I'm checking every 10 minutes. There's no emails. Part of it is just your own sense of self, right? And how now I've got some balance in my life to be able to decide, how do I want to spend my days? How do I want to spend my days work-wise and then not work-wise? I had more flexibility. So lots of adjustments, but they're all good.
Let this podcast be a mini course for people who are interested. Let's make it something like which they can see and they can go to a big course and have a full view of it. So let's start with your niche.
Sure.
The leadership, strategy, and all that.
Yeah, I think it is a niche because, you know, my background and my expertise is really in 3 areas. In organizational culture and change and transformation, in communications, this communication, interpersonal, but workplace, and also strategy and strategic planning. And they're all actually connected because you need to have all those to have a really healthy workplace. My whole focus is about building better workplaces, and that depends on strong leadership to navigate and form and shape cultures. It depends on having a good strategy that actually you can get people to embed and follow and implement, and it's really dependent on communication. And so that's, I think, my niche, if you will. The other part is I have, you know, a very unique background in that I've been able to work in multinational publicly traded companies like Johnson & Johnson. I've worked at several privately held, family-owned organizations, which are a very different dynamic than a publicly traded company. I've worked extensively with public sector organizations plus government, and I've worked in not-for-profit. And so I've been really privileged to have a unique breadth of work experiences and seeing many, many different leaders, hundreds of leaders, and many different cultures. And so I think it sets me up to offer some unique insights into how to build a better workplace.
What is the importance of workplace culture, you think?
That's a great question. It's a really important question. You know, what is the importance? Let's step back.
Okay.
what is workplace culture? How do
Okay.
you define workplace culture? And if you type in workplace culture into Google, you'll get millions of hits, millions of definitions. And I boil it down very simply because I'm a simpleton at heart. And that is, it's the way that stuff gets done around here. It's
What-
the DNA of an organization. And it's how people work together formally and informally. It's how stuff gets done. That's our culture. How we behave, what we believe in, what kind of values we subscribe to, which all influence our behavior. So that's how I define workplace culture. Why is it important is the big question you're asking. It's important because you want to have a workplace culture that attracts people to your organization, that want to come work for you, but more importantly, that want to stay with you. Right? Retention is really important, particularly these days. And if you're an entrepreneur, getting back to your opening comments, you really want to have people stick with you and bringing in their own expertise, their own experiences as you grow and learn as an entrepreneur. And so while I have no formal employees right now, I've got lots of partners. I've got lots of people that I work with, do work for, that I can learn from, that I can bounce ideas off of. So workplace culture is really important. Attracting talent, retaining talent, but also to create an experience for people that they feel good about coming to work, where it's not a job. They wake up excited. I'm going to go to work because I have healthy relationships, because my direct manager has my back, that they care about me as a person, not just about my work, but about me, what's happening in my life. That's why it's important.
You talked about retention of employees. I'd say businessmen usually talk about retention of clients,
Yeah.
not employees. What's more important, employees retention or clients retention?
I say that if you have employees who are happy and engaged, that is, that they strive to do their best work every day, that they have a very good experience, that will translate in to retention of clients. I absolutely believe that. And in fact, in my time at Johnson & Johnson, one of the things that stood out to me was their credo. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but developed, I think 80 years ago now, for a company that's 135 years ago roughly. It's a long time ago, eight decades ago. And it was developed, and it's just 4 paragraphs, to provide guidance around how the company should operate and how they should make decisions, in short. And to your point, what do you think the first thing they talk about in the credo is? Is it shareholders? Is it the banks? Is it customers? Or is it employees?
Employees?
It's employees. Exactly. And they say if we take care of employees, they will take care of the company. And the company includes our shareholders and our customers. And I fully agree with them 100%. I really believe, and I've seen it firsthand with organizations, that highly engaged workforces, and we know this, by the way, that's not just me. You can go on, there's decades of research that show workforces or workplace cultures where employees are highly engaged, that is, they come to work feeling good and doing their best work, outperform other businesses. It's a fact. It's not up for discussion. There's decades of research that show that. So then the question really becomes, how could workplace culture not be important? If you want to drive better performance, however you measure that in your organization, maybe it's financial, maybe it's number of subscribers, maybe whatever you offer, if you want to drive better outcomes, you've got to have a good workplace culture. There's just no way around it.
What about workplace cultures of online companies?
Owner companies?
Online companies.
Online companies.
Like the work from home companies.
Yeah. What about it?
How do you create this workplace culture? Because when you meet a person every day, it's easy.
Yeah.
But it's not that easy when you don't even interact, and the person you are contacting every day is sitting 3,000 miles from you.
Look, It's a great question. I don't think anything beats this. Nothing beats face-to-face.
Mm-hmm.
I have a huge however. However, I also think that too many people and too many organizations made too big of a deal that when COVID hit and we moved largely to a remote or hybrid environment, that was going to be the downfall of collaboration, of creativity, of innovation, of workplace culture. Pick your adjective. And I don't buy it because that's not what I saw. It's not what we experienced at the last company I was at, where half of our workforce, 4,000 employees of the 8, were remote and all over the world, and half had to be on site because it was a manufacturing business. And I've spoken with other people on the same thing. And our engagement didn't go down, it actually went up. So I don't believe that an online company fundamentally is any different at creating a culture. I do think they have to work harder at it if the amount of time is really minimal for face-to-face or if it's non-existent. But I still think you can make a connection. I mean, you've got to have cameras on for sure. You've got to have eye contact for sure. But I don't think that negates the ability to create a culture. I just don't. It's not what I've seen.
Okay. I'll step back to our previous conversation. You were talking about Johnson & Johnson and their work culture, their retention of employees. I'll talk about an Indian group.
Okay.
The Tata group, if you know.
I've heard of them. Yeah.
So I'll tell you about a case study and I'd like you to talk about it.
Okay.
This happened in 2008. There was an attack on India, a terrorist attack. It happened on a hotel that's in Mumbai called the Taj Hotel.
I remember.
Now, this hotel is owned by Tatas. It was the first hotel in India to have electricity. It was built in 90s and 18s something. I would say when we talk about India, we talk about Gateway of India, Taj Mahal, we talk about Taj Hotel because that hotel is not just hotel, it's a cultural heritage place.
Okay.
Now, this attack happened on that hotel because they wanted to damage the culture. But what the employees did was something that grabbed attention of everyone. Even the employees that were 10 days, they got their offer letter from the company 10 days prior to the 10 days prior to the attack. These employees did not run. They were there. They came out, they went in again, they were rescuing guests. They knew if they are going in hotel back, they'll die. There is a great chance of losing their lives. They still chose that. And I don't remember which university, I think it was Harvard Business School, or I don't exactly remember which university was it. They did a research that how is that possible? Do you pay more to your employees? What is the secret? How is it possible that an employee that joined you 10 days prior to the attack was ready to give his life for you?
And what did they find out?
They tried for a few months and they could not find anything. When they had a chance to meet Ratan Tata sir, he's the founder. I'd not say founder because it was founded by his forefathers, but like a CEO and chief in command, I would say.
Yeah.
He told, you guys are checking the wrong path. The answer lies not after the employment happened. The answer lies before the employment happened. We connected with them. We started building that culture before they even got employed with us. We gave them enough values. We checked the values first of all, and we inculcated their values with ours.
I gotta tell you, that is a very compelling example, Nitin. It speaks to so many things. First of all, it's a great example of culture at a time of extreme hardship and difficulty, at a time of crisis. At my last organization, there was what people in my field call a black swan event, which is something you could never possibly imagine happening.
What's that?
It's an unpredictable, very rare event, but it's a crisis.
Okay.
And our founder and his wife were murdered in their home. Mm-hmm. They were prominent, well-known philanthropists. They were in their 70s. And he was still in the office every day doing research. He wasn't leading the company, but he had founded it. And we were approaching our 46th year.
Would you like to name the company?
Apotex.
Apotex.
Yeah, so Barry and Honey Sherman. And why I say that is, when that happened, our employees, not dissimilar from those at the hotel, mobilized, self-mobilized. They galvanized around this tragedy, but also around honoring his legacy and deciding what could they do in honor of him in their work every day. The second thing, though, in your example that I think I'd like to talk a bit more about is what you said about the fact that what the research showed is that it started before they joined. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that I talk about around workplace culture is, yes, it's important around behaviors. And yes, it's important to have strong communication. And yes, strong leadership. But culture is holistic. Holistic meaning from the moment we start recruiting people, to use your example, to the way we treat them on the way out of the organization. And hopefully they stay for a long time, but if they choose not to, even still, it's end-to-end, holistic, comprehensive, what's their experience, and how does our culture show up? So one of the things I talk about is the recruitment process. Is the culture that we have or that we want to reinforce, to your point, does that show up in our recruitment process? And when I say recruitment process, I mean where we place ads, where we promote, the words we use, the images, the visuals. Are there cultural and gender diversity examples? It's everything. The questions that we ask candidates in the interviews, the way that we ask them, is it all representative of the culture we have and the culture we want? And then when they join us, what's their onboarding like? When they join us, how do we treat them? Do we say, Nitin, here's your computer and good luck and Godspeed? Or do we say, you're going to have a buddy. This person's going to show you the way stuff gets done around here so that you have a quick learning curve, so you can feel comfortable, so you can reduce the anxiety. If you just look at your example of an employee life cycle, that alone, there are so many examples of workplace culture. But I'm going to give you one other example. I read about this last year, and I think you'll find it very moving. The Los Angeles Dodgers, right, Major League Baseball team. They had a player a few years ago who had an injury. Okay. And he wasn't able to play the whole season, but they paid him as per his contract. And the next season, he wasn't able to come back, so he was off on disability, and so they didn't see and keep in touch with him the whole time. And then he started having some mental health issues. And then they lost track of him. Anyways, they subsequently found him homeless behind a building, I think at the airport in Florida. So he hasn't been an active employee, even though he was an athlete, for some time. How do you think that organization reacted to that situation? What they did is they put him back on their health benefits plan to make sure he could get the professional help he needed, get the medicines that he needed, that he wouldn't have to worry about anything while he healed psychologically, emotionally, and physically. Why do I share that? Because when you go to their website, they say, we're an environment that takes care of our people. That's what taking care of our people looks like. That if somebody loses their way, even a famous athlete who's paid a lot of money, and gets diagnosed with a mental health disorder and becomes homeless, we're going to pull them out and we're going to help them. I think that's unbelievable. That's what I'm talking about. When a culture is embedded, the values come to life. Same with your hotel. Nowhere was it written, if anything ever happens in this hotel, we expect you to come running into a burning building and save your colleagues. But they did it because they cared. They were loyal. They were dedicated. And why were they that way? Because they were treated that way. It's often not more complex than the way we treat people. That's what you have to think. Again, there's lots of papers and lots of very smart people in academics. I think culture is not that complex. Having said that, it does require intent. You do have to be intentional about it and deliberate. And if you're an entrepreneur, like when we started the conversation, that's even more difficult because you're running around trying to set your organization up and trying to get your first sale, maybe pay your bills, do some promotion, do business development, do invoicing, you're doing everything. And while you're bringing people on as your business grows, you've got to be very intentional about the culture you want to create. It can't just happen, or else it's going to happen and it'll form, but not necessarily in a way that you want it to or that will benefit the growing organization.
I'd say an employee would not even go to a burning hotel even if you pay him $1 million.
Right. So what motivated them to do that? It was just instinctual, to your point. They didn't think twice about it.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about people who are earning high salaries.
Right.
Or they were not millionaires or something.
Right. They weren't the executives.
No.
Right.
They were on blue collar jobs.
Right.
Many were on blue collar jobs.
Yes.
And they joined in not even a month prior to the attack.
They were living the values of that organization. They were giving back to the organization had given to them. You know, culture is much more than words on a page. You know, if you go into many organizations, you go into their lobbies, you know, this is our vision, this is our mission, this is our culture, these are our values. That's great, and there's some importance to keeping those front and center. But it's much more about what you described. What happens when things get tough? How do people behave then? It requires an emotional connection between an employee and the organization. That's what culture is about. It's not about, it's a job, I'm going to come to work. It's, I want to join Nitin as he grows the Mug Talks empire because of the way he treats me. Not only do I think he's got a great idea and I think it's going to be successful and I want to be part of it, so there's obviously we look after ourselves, but also because I like how I feel when I go into work. I'm inspired, I'm motivated, I have an emotional connection. And that's what companies struggle with. Big companies, particularly when you've got hundreds of thousands of people, and when you're an entrepreneur. And so that's also why, again, when I say they're all connected, that I focus on leadership in my company. Because leaders are the people that have the most ability to impact the biggest number of people. The people at the top of an organization is 10 people, 8 people, maybe. But if you've got 100,000 people, those 8 people are not touching those 100,000 employees. All the levels of below them who have bigger scopes of people have the ability to impact them and to create that experience where people will run into a building.
Before we jump into our mini course, I'd like to share one more
Please.
story. This story is of an Indian company, Stage.
Okay.
It's called Stage. So, not to go much deep into the what happened before, but I'll just brief it up for you. The founders had a company that was shut down within a night. So when they slept, the company's turnover, let's say, was few $1 million, and they woke up, it was zero. Their accounts were deleted, the company went bankrupt, everything was zero.
Okay.
And they could not fire employees. So they kept paying salaries from whatever they had for 6-7 months. And brainstorming happened, everything happened, and the idea of Stage company came in. This is what the founder says, that after 6-7 months, we were at a stage when we had no money. and we told our employees that, see, we have a new idea of this new concept called stage, but we don't have money to pay. So we don't want to fire anyone, but we don't know what to do. Imagine what happened. These employees came in. Now, I'm talking about employees, they were earning $400 a month, $500 a month.
Right.
Their families were dependent on them.
Yeah.
These employees came in, and more than 60-70% of them, if I'm not wrong, they came in to say, we'll work for free for the company for next 6 months, no matter what. Tell us how much money company needs, we'll bring back. I have $1,000, I have $1,200 in saving, I have $1,500 in saving, we'll bring them up. And the founder says this motivated us to a level that we need to show what we are. And after 2 years, today, Stage gave exit to these employees as their first investors with few folds of what they expected. Now, it's not about how much they paid, because no employee worked for money there.
Right.
They worked for the culture. Why I'm building this pre-context with the stories, because people need to know what is the importance of culture.
I think it's a great story, and if you don't mind, I'll share a similar one, because it speaks to culture, but it also speaks to leadership again.
True.
And the leaders of that company. There's a company called Gravity Payments in the US, small company. And I talk about this example in my workshops. And the way I talk about it is about culture, I talk about leadership, and I also talk about engaging those people when you're facing tough times to help you find a solution. Because again, often leaders think, I have to have the answers. And what happened with Gravity Payments is they're similar to Interact. They're point of sale payment processing service. And when COVID hit and the traffic in stores, retail became much slower, they started to fall on hard times, and it got to the point, not dissimilar from yours, where the president said, well, I can either lay everybody off or I can declare bankruptcy. Now, I will say I've supported more than 12 CEOs in the past 20 years, and I have worked with several others. And the vast majority that I know would have likely taken one of those two courses. But this person said, actually, I'm going to go and talk to my employees, tell them the situation I'm in, and see if they have ideas. And not dissimilar from your example from India, what do you think the employees said? They said, we will meet with you one-on-one, and based on our own financial situation, maybe we have children, maybe we're caring for elderly parents, we have a mortgage, we'll decide what cut in pay we can take and for how long so that we can keep this company afloat together. He had 40 employees, he went around, had one-on-ones with everybody, and lo and behold, they're still here years later and thriving. And again, it's people had an emotional connection and they were brought into the conversation also in this case. So I love your example. These are the kinds of stories that need to be told more often so that other leaders and other organizations can be less short-sighted and see the possibilities and see that there isn't one right answer. You don't have to declare bankruptcy. You don't have to close your doors. You don't have to lay off people. You can bring the problem to people, be transparent about it, and say, here's the situation we're in. We're thinking about this. What do you think?
When you don't think that your employees are just your employees, when you think they are your business partners, they are the ones who are thriving your company. They are the ones who are riding your horses.
Spot on. That's exactly it, Nitin. When you don't treat employees like employees, right? When you treat them like people, by the way, when you tell them stuff because you respect them, even though it might be difficult for them to hear. You don't treat them like employees. You say, look, we're going through some tough times. We're not sure how we're going to get out of it, but I want to tell you about it to make sure you're not caught off guard. And also, maybe you've got an idea. But so few companies do that. So few companies do that.
How to build this culture in a company. See, vaguely, many people can come and tell, okay, you can do this, you can do this, just shooting arrows for no target. But what I'd like to know is a point to point way ahead or pathway of how this looks like, how you can develop culture similar to these organizations. Now we have talked about Tata Group, that is, I think, few $billion company. We have talked about other big companies and a small company as well. And it does, if someone is, I shared two examples of one big and one small, because it does not matter how big your company is or how small your company is. Culture is important.
Yes.
Because many would come and say, our company is not that big so that we can start making this cultural thing and everything. And we are not yet that big that we can offer something to our employees, but it's not about offering.
It's about creating an experience. So to your point, what's the first step? I mean, if you're just starting a company, you have to, for yourself, define what is important to you. What are your personal values? And how do those show up, because they naturally should, in the way you conduct your business? Mm-hmm. So you're fortunate, you've got some co-founders here. I'm sure when the three of you sat down, you probably talked about not just what you want to do, but how you want to do it, how you want to show up with guests on your podcast, with customers who buy things from you, whatever your business is. And so I think if you're an entrepreneur, you have to just sort of define what culture means to you. Again, there's no one right answer. It's what it means to you. And be very clear about it. And then be very intentional, very deliberate about making sure that the way you've defined it shows up in the way that you operate your business. That comes from processes that you have, to the way you answer the phone, to how quickly you follow up on a complaint, to how you treat employees. It's everything. And that's what I was saying earlier about end-to-end and holistic. You gave a great example about the employee and when you're onboarding. And so we talked about just the employee experience, the life cycle of an employee. They get hired, they get onboarded, they perform, they get evaluated. What does that performance review look like? They get promoted. That's one part of it. Then there's all the operations of the company. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, my wife and I ordered something from a retailer. I would prefer not to say the name, but it's a well-known retailer, and we ordered it online, okay? And within about an hour, as is wont to happen, wife decided, no, don't want this anymore. So we went on to cancel it. And it said, error message cannot be canceled. And we were like, that's weird. So the next morning, called and said, hi, we ordered this thing last night. We tried to cancel it, but we can't cancel it. And the person on the other end said, no, it's already being processed. And I said, right, but we don't want to purchase it anymore, so you probably shouldn't spend time and money and effort processing it. No, it has to go through our process. And I said, what's the process? Well, we have to fulfill it. We have to pick the product off the shelf in the warehouse. We've got to bring it to the packing part of the warehouse. We've got to pack it up. Then we've got to take it to our transportation hub. We have to ship it to you. And then once you receive it, if you don't want it, you have to call us. We'll send you a return form, and then you'll return it to us. Now you're laughing, and I was laughing because I said, pardon? Are you being serious? And she said, yes, this is our process. I said, is your process not flexible? Like, we literally placed the order 6 hours ago. You're going to spend all this time and money and effort with different people in your company shipping us a product that you're asking us then to spend time returning to you.
And anyway, you will refund the amount. So you are in the loss.
Yes. It makes no sense. But this is what I'm saying about culture. If you go onto their website, what do you think it says? Customers are the most important thing to us. Really? Well, if they are, why would you make canceling an order so difficult? So when we talk about culture, it has to permeate every part of your business. I mean every part. If you say, think about this. When you go into a retail store and you buy something, you're in and out in what, 30 seconds, right? They take your credit card or your money. Then when you go to return it, what happens? Oh, okay, Mr. Chopra, Dr. Chopra, you want to return this. Can I have your mailing address? Why? Are you going to mail me something? Oh, I have to fill out this form. Can we have your email address? Do you have any nieces or nephews? How much money did you... Like, it's a whole thing. You're there for 15 minutes. It's like, when I bought it, you were quick to get me out. When I come and return it, I got to invest all this time. What's that about? It's about culture. How is it that we want to show up for the people that matter to us? Customers, partners, suppliers, guests, employees, it doesn't matter. We have to be thoughtful about it. We have to be intentional, or else stuff will happen. You'll get this process at this retailer that says you can't cancel something 10 minutes after ordering it. It's got to go through the entire process. Sorry. And then when you get it, you're going to have to spend time downloading a form, completing it, and physically dropping it off, by the way, at a UPS or a shipper. We're not going to come to your house. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Does it make sense to you?
Of course
No.
not.
We're dealing with culture is simple. The complexity comes with thinking through, how does it show up in your business? How does it show up in your business? You gave some great examples, Nitin, some very compelling examples of clearly when a culture is very embedded. For employees of any tenure, of brand new employees to rush in a tragic situation to try to help save other colleagues or the business, that speaks volumes. So when people come and they say, well, how can I make our culture stronger and more embedded? I say, do a bit of an audit. Where isn't it showing up that you need it to show up? Have you looked at all your processes? Have you looked at all your operations? Of all different kinds. I mean, the employee life cycle is a process. There's a whole process, right, in HR.
True.
We've got to attract people, then we've got to recruit them, then we've got to onboard them, then we've got to develop and grow them, then we've got to reward them, then we've got to promote them. That's just the employee. Then you've got everything else.
I'll take your example of this, the shipping thing.
Okay.
It shows that employee was not meant to take decisions.
Yes.
Right?
They were not empowered. Exactly.
They were not empowered to take any decision, and they were scared of their supervisors. That if they take this decision, the supervisors might fire them.
Yes, I agree.
This is what I understand.
I agree with you. Look, I went to Disney a few years ago.
I might be wrong, but...
and I might get this a bit wrong, but what I was told about Disney is that whoever you are in Disney, when you're in one of their theme parks, even if you're the person who is on the custodial staff, sweeping, keeping the grounds beautiful, if a guest comes up and wants something, you have the power to help that guest. Doesn't matter your role. You don't have to be senior, you don't have to be this, you don't have to have a title. Our whole thing is to make guests happy. And to do that is exactly what you said, which is give people the power to make guests happy. Versus saying, okay, guest, I'm just the person sweeping. You've got to go to guest services, then you go to a booth, and then guest services, well, we can't refund it. We have to talk to our manager, and then the manager... Is that really what we want?
Thinking about this thing from an entrepreneur point of view,
Yeah.
some people might come to this conclusion that we might face losses if we give decision-making powers to employees, because maybe some employees are not well enough to take such important decisions, or if some employee starts taking these decisions, at a point of time they can feel that they have returned 1,000 packages and we are in loss. What about that?
Look, I think that's absolutely valid in terms of a concern. I also think that risk can be mitigated with proper training. You know, I don't think it's something that's insurmountable to overcome. I just don't. I think if you train people and empower them and give them the tools and the knowledge and the support and the resources to do their job, by and large, they're going to do their job. And look, some people are going to be rock stars and some people are going to be rocks. And you know, again, somebody much smarter than me said to me, like, you can't just have rock stars on your team. Sometimes you need rocks that are just stable and get work done consistently to a high quality. And some people are really high performers. But I think the number of losses and the magnitude in general would likely be quite small if you supported them with the right training. I really do. So I think it's a valid concern, but again, I think it speaks to how are you bringing people in as an entrepreneur into your business? What are you doing to support them at this period of phase of growth of the company and of them as individual employees?
Boss and a leader. Here's what the difference comes in.
Yes.
Right.
That's a good distinction. That's a great distinction. It is. I loathe the term boss. I don't. I mean, what does it really connote? What does it really convey? That I tell you what to do. That I boss you?
Decision-making ability, as we are talking about.
Yeah. I mean, look. The other thing is, look. This is just my view. I don't believe in hiring smart, talented people at whatever level, junior, mid, senior, executive level, and then removing all the autonomy for them to do their jobs, which includes decision making. Because I'm hiring you to do something. Either I trust you to do that or I don't. And if I don't trust you, then I don't know. Do you want to work for someone who doesn't trust you? That's a question you have to ask yourself, right? Like as employees, I just met with someone last week. You know, they wanted to prepare for an interview and they wanted some tips. And I said, look, happy to prepare you. You should also be prepared to ask questions of this organization. You're not the only one being interviewed. They're also being interviewed, or you should consider about interviewing them. Do you want to join that organization? Do you know enough about how they work, how they treat each other, how they'll treat you when you join? And so you have to think of questions that will elicit, what is it like to work there? What's the culture like? And it can't be asking Nitin, what's the culture like at the Mug Talks? Because you'll say, oh, we're collaborative. No, you have to give me examples. You know, what happens when? And get very specific so you can uncover what it's like to work there.
Okay, we were talking about 4 pillars of creating culture in a business.
Okay.
Leadership, one we talked about.
Yeah.
What's the second one?
I think it's values, to be honest with you. I mean, so much of a culture has to come from values. Values of the founder, values of the organization, and those values, again, can't be words on a page. You have to define them because people interpret things differently, right? And I think that we often make the mistake that when I say something or I send out an email to you or to 10,000 people, I think we make the mistake that they've all interpreted it the same way, and that they've interpreted it the way that I intended it to be interpreted, let alone I've assumed that they've opened it and read it, which is another assumption. So I think with values, it's really important to define them. So I'll give you an example. At several organizations I both have worked at and whom I've consulted have collaboration as a value. Now, on the surface, most people would say collaboration is the ability to work with someone else, and that's part of collaboration. But some of these organizations went a step deeper, and they wrote a whole paragraph about what does it look like in action? How does it manifest itself? It's more than just the ability to work with someone. It means I actually want to hear from you. I'm going to proactively seek out your perspective on things because I respect you. That's collaboration. It means I'm going to stand down and let you be the person who's right in situations because that's collaboration. It's about compromise. And they did a really nice job of defining it, which was helpful Because then when it comes to evaluating employees at the end of the year, and we say, oh, Nitin is really good at collaborating and so is Jordan, well, let's talk about how do they collaborate then? Well, he worked with so many people and they all liked him. Okay, well, that's great. Is that collaboration? Whereas maybe Jordan did something different. So I think the values part of it, when you talk about 4 pillars, it really starts with that. To your point, it shows up in leadership for sure and gets embedded by leadership, but it starts with what do we stand for? What's important to us? Mm-hmm. What do we want to be important to our employees? So that when people interact with our organization, they also experience those values. So values would be pillar number 2, Dr. Chopra.
Leadership and values. Now it reminds me of former President of India,
Okay.
Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam.
Okay.
He is called the Missile Man of India. So to say, he built rockets for India, for space and all that. He was among the founding members of Indian Space Research Organization, a prestigious one for now. He shared a story, and it goes like, it was the founding days of ISRO, and they were building India's first rocket to go into space, accumulating a lot of cash from a country that needs cash in different ways, not developed yet. They need schools, universities, and a rocket takes
a lot of resources.
I'd say bunch of resources, cash, abilities, people. Now, what happens? They fail the first time. And of course, media comes in and media says that you guys have done wrong with the country, because a country where we need universities, schools and everything, you guys have wasted these many $1 million. Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam that time was not a chairperson, but his some junior scientist or senior scientist. While addressing the media,
Mm-hmm.
his supervisor goes. His supervisor takes lead on addressing the media and says, I'm sorry, we have failed, but let alone we'll pass. Give us chance. We'll pass one day. And Abdul Kalam says, I was shivering because I was chief in command for this program. But my chairman goes in and apologizes. Now, time passes by, 4 years pass by, and one more rocket is ready. This time, they succeed. They go into the orbit, they put their satellite in the orbit, everything goes well. And again, there is media. You have done a great job. And again, the same chairperson, same chairman comes in and says, Dr. Kalam, go up. You need to address the media. And Dr. Kalam, when he was President of India, he told, this is how leadership looks like. When you are in crisis, you are up, facing everyone. And when there's time to embrace what you have done and to showcase to the world, you tell your employees and your junior staff that it's your time to go up and show up.
I love that example. We need more examples like that for leaders.
That's what value looks like. Leadership and value. This is a combination.
It
how
is.
It looks like.
It's a perfect example. It's a perfect blend of that. And, I think to your point also, there's no greater test of leadership than during a time of crisis. The level of scrutiny, the level of expectation about how you lead through times of difficulty is the greatest at that time. And the amount of direction and reassurance and comfort that employees and other stakeholders are looking for is insatiable during a time of crisis, a time of uncertainty. And so I love that example, and I love that it's got both success and failure, and that at a time of success, let the people who really made it happen stand up and shine. And that is, humility is a big part of leadership, right? I'd be interested in your take though on this. I think the challenge I've seen with leadership over the years, whether it's been entrepreneurs or whether veteran leaders who've been around a long time, or even new leaders at large and small organizations, is that often people are promoted on what they've achieved, but they're not necessarily armed with, quote, leadership skills. Meaning we assume because Nitin is the president of India that he's got all the leadership skills, or he's the CEO of the Mug Talks. We make these assumptions and we put people in these positions, but have they had any kind of skills training or competency training or capability building? Have they had coaches? Have they had other people challenging their thinking? I just find it's interesting, and I don't know, I know you've had a number of guests on here, but my personal experience has been that many leaders are where they're at because of what they've been able to achieve, not necessarily because of how they've been able to achieve. And a big part of leadership is the how. How do we mobilize other people to, quote, follow us? How do we mobilize other people to have a connection to the organization? How do we take it beyond ourselves to be selfless? And how do we elevate it so that it's the cause of the organization or the purpose? How do we do that?
You talked about training of leaders and what they have achieved and how they have achieved. What they have achieved is important.
Yes.
I would say. But how they have achieved is more important. Are they stepping on their companions to achieve what they have achieved? Or they are humble enough to let their companions take the pride?
Right.
Many leaders are leaders without training, mentors, and even I would say many people right now, they don't understand what is the importance of having mentors in your life.
I would agree.
They highly underestimate the importance of mentors. I'd say if you're my mentor, something which I learn after 4 years of my hardship, I can just call you and ask you, I'm having difficulty here. If I have a good relationship with my mentor, I can just call and I can say, I have this problem going on. Can you please help? And when you add that word please, believe me, anyone will help you out. You just say them, I don't have money, I don't have anything, but I need your help. Everyone is human. Everyone wants to feel good. And that's the way how they feel good, that they have done something for the world. For someone in need. I have not met a guest whom I'll call and ask, I need this help from you, and they'll say no. I don't think.
Right.
Just, you should be courageous enough to call the guest or call your mentor. The importance of mentorship is highly underestimated, as the importance of reading books is. A book, let's say I read your book. It will tell me about 30, 40, 50 years of your experience. Right?
Maybe not 50, but 30.
30, like that's what I'm saying, 30, 40, 50 years of your experience. And it might take me so many years to learn that myself.
Right.
But within 200 pages, I have concluded everything. If I've read 12 books in a year, I have lived 300 years of experience I have. And if you have a living book, which I call mentor, you have everything solved. You just have to give a call.
I think the notion of continuous learning, to your point, whether it's from a book or mentor, cannot be overstated enough.
True.
I totally agree with you, and it doesn't matter where you're at in your career. I mean, I'm like to think I'm constantly open to learning, and I actively seek it out. I read, I attend webinars and lectures, I go to things, conferences. Yeah, and I think for people who are watching or listening to this, I think especially people who are earlier in their career, they should take your advice. They should find a mentor. There are organizations, particularly for entrepreneurs and things like that, that they can join, which can be helpful, but they do cost money, and sometimes you don't have money. But I think if there are more people like you and maybe people like me and many other people I know who are willing to give of their time, I think that's going to benefit more people.
Simple. You, me, we cannot give money to any founder or anything. We don't have, I'd say, we really don't have millions of dollars to fund the startup. But these people have experiences. We have experiences. And that one experience can change the way that entrepreneur is looking at his startup.
Yeah, I think that's really important also to highlight that the sense of community that you're talking about being generous, it doesn't have to be with money. It's just going to be with your time and your insight and your expertise and just your willingness to serve others. I mean, I was a coach for my kids' hockey teams, all three of them, for 12 years. I'm not even a great hockey player, but I was coaching these kids to play hockey because they rely on volunteers to do it. I love what you're saying, and I do, whenever I can, I recommend to people, particularly those people who reach out to me, I'm happy to spend time at least once a week. I spend time with someone. 90% of the time, it's a stranger. I've never met them. They reach out and they want to have a conversation. And I recommend that they look for a mentor, officially or unofficially. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. It's just, to your point, someone you can go to as a sounding board, ask some advice, share your perspective and say, what do you think? It's critically important. You don't have to solve everything by yourself. That's the other thing about leaders, right? Again, we're coming full circles, that often I meet leaders who think they have to have all the answers. You know, I think Steve Jobs said it. It's like, why would you hire a bunch of people only to tell them everything? Why don't you listen? That's why we have 2 of these and 1 of these.
So true.
Right? You're supposed to listen more.
This is something again that I learned from Steve Jobs. He says there's difference between hearing and listening.
Yes.
You can hear, but it's not important. You need to listen.
I talk about it a lot in my communication skills courses. Because, look, we're all guilty of it. I am too. It's human nature that when we have a conversation, and I'm talking to you, and while I'm talking to you, what are you doing? You're thinking about what I'm saying and how to respond. And if you're thinking about what I'm saying and how to respond, it's very hard to listen.
True.
You're hearing me. So what I say to people is, rather than go back and forth, it's okay to pause. Humans do not like silence. We don't like a moment of silence. We find it extremely awkward, which is why as soon as somebody's talking, we either interrupt them, we talk over them, or as soon as they finish talking, we respond. It's a very unusual thing.
I have a mentor. He told once that whenever someone is telling you something, let them conclude it, take a 2-second pause, and respond. First thing, the person will feel that they were heard.
Right.
Second, you will have ample of time to conclude their talk, process it, and give the best of your answers.
Right. I think that's great advice. I think that's great advice.
Now, it would take me 4, 5, 6 years to learn that, but because I had a mentor, got it, and within few months,
You started applying it. It's interesting. A few years ago, I was invited to speak at a town hall. There were a couple hundred people there. And the site leader of that facility had a few guest speakers. I was one of them. And I happened to be the last one. And so after I sat down, he opened it up for questions and answers on all the presentations. And he got up and he said, does anybody have any questions? Okay, good. Thank you everybody for coming. And he came up to me after and he said, what did you think? I said, well, I thought the speakers were amazing, great content. Can I give you some feedback? He said, yeah. I said, you've got to pause on the Q&A part. What do you mean? I said, well, you gave about a half a second. I said, there's 300 people. We've been here an hour and a half. They've heard from 4 different presenters. There's a ton of information. People process things at different speeds. You've also got introverts who don't typically want to put up their hand in front of you. Got to say, anybody have any questions? I'm just going to look around the room here and see if there's any brave souls. You got to give them time, right? Just let the content breathe. Let it sit, and then someone will put up their hand. But we don't love silence. So instead we say, anybody have any questions? Great. Perfect. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great night.
So I think third pillar goes with communication.
Huge. Huge. And it's interesting because I'm a communications expert sort of by trade. That's how I started my career, and I've been doing it always. And we talk a lot about it in helping to inform and shape cultures. And it does play a critical role, but you can't just tell people about what to expect, and you can't tell them to behave and expect them to behave that way. Mm-hmm. So yes, communication can help with awareness. Yes, it can help with education and understanding. Yes, it can help to reinforce when we see people doing things that we want them to do. It can do a lot. You've just got to not over-expect from communication that that's going to be the way to shape your culture. But to your point, it absolutely is the third pillar. It's the third pillar. And can I give you one example?
Please.
At my last organization, I was very fortunate to have an unbelievable team supporting me. And they created a lot of content. And one of the ways we reinforced our culture was when we wrote about an employee doing something or being part of a team who achieved some milestone, where appropriate, we called out the values that were demonstrated so that people could see them, that when we talk about courage or talk about passion, this is what we're talking about. When Nitin and the team did this, this is an example of that. So we talked about the outcome, the achievement. We talked about it in the context of our values and our culture. And that's what I'm saying. That's a form of communication because we're creating the content. But it's not just telling people, hey, Nitin, this is our culture. Please now go and be that culture. So communication, super important.
How is communication important for a leader versus an employee?
Wow, really important question. It's a great question. You know, what I like to say in my counsel to all the leaders that I coach is that the vast majority of leaders underestimate their impact on employees. And what I mean by that is employees look to their leaders to help make sense of the world around them, the world inside the company. So they hang on every word that a leader says and how they say it and what they don't say. And they draw inferences. They draw conclusions from it. And the way they behave. Oh, we saw Nitin behave this way with this person. How come he didn't talk about this? And they create stuff. And so I say communication is absolutely critical. And by the way, it's another skill that is never really taught or never sought after as a leader. And it's assumed that because so-and-so is an executive vice president or a senior vice president, that they must have strong communication skills. And I say false. I've just met too many people, hundreds of people, that's not the case. So I think one thing from leader versus employee is leader is about perspective and context, right? Helping the employee understand why decisions were made, why this decision wasn't made. Because remember, in most organizations, employees just hear the outcome. You and your co-founders meet and make a bunch of decisions, then you make an announcement. Nobody knows that you debated and thought about 50 different ways of pursuing something. They only hear the outcome. So I say leaders, give context. I tell leaders to be proactive, to share. Not less is more. More is, important. Share. as much as you can, not everything, certain things are confidential. And I think vice versa, the employee's responsibility around communication is also significant. They have to ask for what they need. If they don't understand something or don't agree with something, find a way to express that. You can't sit back as an employee, as a victim, and say, they're not doing this. I wish they did this. How come he said this? How come she didn't do that? How about find your voice and share that feedback? Because not everybody knows everything. The leader may not know that's how they showed up. Sometimes we have unintended impacts on somebody. We have a conversation, I think it went well, you walk away thinking, whatever, he was too assertive or he was too this. So I say to employees, you have a responsibility. You have to communicate. I met with somebody a year ago and they said they were concerned they didn't have a development plan. And they said, isn't that my manager's responsibility? And I said, well, it's a joint responsibility. Yes, your manager should be there supporting you in your development. And if you don't have a plan, it's your responsibility to say, hi, manager, I need and want a development plan. That's how I see leader-employee different.
As a leader, I feel it's not that important to speak, but it's important to connect. Now again, there is difference between just speaking, there was difference between listening
and hearing.
Again, there is difference between speaking and connecting. The thing you talked about in Q&A session. Communication is not one way.
Right.
It's a two-way process. So someone has spoken. Now you need to give time to your employees or listeners or anyone to respond back.
Right. And give them permission, by the way, to disagree with you also, to challenge you. I'll be honest, it didn't happen overnight. It took me a long time to accept this. Not accept it, believe it and see value in it, which is, I know this much. But when I'm surrounded by a team, I suddenly know this much. In other words, if you firmly believe in the diversity of perspective, in the diversity of wisdom, that other people have ideas that can build on yours or be better than yours, I'm only interested in the best outcome. I wasn't always. There were definitely times when I want to be right. But I realize it's much more important to be interested in the best outcome, however you get there. And a big part of it is, as you say, connecting with people and communicating in a way that fosters that environment. So they can say, you know what, Nitin, I don't believe you. I have a different idea. Or I disagree with you. I look at things differently. I think that's when the best thinking and best outcomes happen.
Again, the difference is boss and a leader.
Yes, it is.
You cannot speak in front of a boss. You need to obey and say, okay, everything is correct. But in front of a leader, you can say, I don't agree.
Look, when I wrote my book, which was all about connection through communication, the reason I landed on the 3 cornerstones of transparency, consistency, and authenticity is that those are the forms of communication that allow you to make a connection with people. And at the end of the day, it's exactly what you said, which is it's all about connection. That's the way you're going to move people. When I say move them, influence them, mobilize them, shape them, generate buy-in, generate support, generate ideas, give you feedback so you can learn. Imagine a time when you have leaders so self-aware and comfortable that they realize, A, they're not perfect, and B, they've created an environment where a direct report can say, I think you got it wrong in that meeting. Here's what I would have done, or I would have done it differently. There's not a lot of leaders I know that are that open to that.
Okay, let's move on to our 4th pillar.
Okay.
What's that?
Let's recap the 3. Leadership, values, communication. I would say the 4th is behaviors. If you go back to my original definition of culture, I said It's the way stuff gets done around here. And that is, yes, in the way we communicate with one another, and it's the way we work with one another. It's the way that we interact with one another. It comes down to behaviors. They're all connected. And that's why I talk about the things I do in my business as being really connected. Communication, culture, change, strategy, they're all connected. It's very hard to lead an organization if you don't have a really sound, clear strategy, right? If it's not communicated well, if you don't have a culture that can do that. In fact, just to digress for a moment, if you even look in Harvard Business Review, you'll see a few stats that back this up. They'll say that 90% of strategic plans fail to be implemented, and 70% of change plans or transformation plans fail to get implemented. It's all about the how. How did they behave? How did they do that? It's not about the what. It was a great strategy on paper, right? I know what we're going to do. You shared with me before the podcast, you've got a strategy to grow this in this period of time. It's very clear. The thing is, how are you going to make that happen? That's behaviors. You have to have behaviors as part of culture, or else, again, values just live on the wall. How do you bring them to life? How do you show up? That's behavior. It's also behavior and communication. I talk about consistency. When I talk about the trust trifecta in my book, and consistency is one of them, it's because consistency isn't just about what we say. We have to back it up with our actions. You can't say one thing and then behave in a different way, because that's inconsistent. And when you see a leader being inconsistent, what does that do to trust? It erodes it. It doesn't build it up. It erodes it. If you tell me something and I believe you, and then I see you doing something that's counter to that, that's not consistent. So I talk about consistency in communication, and I talk about it both in words and behaviors. Behaviors for culture are absolutely the fourth pillar. That is your house. You've got your foundation. You've got your 4 pillars. The key is to put them all together. And again, it's not that it's complex as a concept. I'd also say it's not easy, but it's not impossible, but you have to have a plan to do it. You have to be deliberate. It's not just going to all fall into place.
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Exactly. That's a better way of saying it. It's simple, but not easy. Requires a plan.
Reminds me of one thing. Let's say you need to travel to Vancouver.
Okay.
How will you do that? What is the way? How are you going to do it? Give me an option.
You could fly.
Okay, flights are not available. But you need to be there.
Drive.
Snowstorms are there, not available.
Train.
Snowstorms, not available.
Bicycle. Very far.
Again, very far. You can reach there, but let's say some interruption is there.
How about over Zoom? Do you have to be there physically?
Physically. It's very important for you to go there. Mm-hmm. Let's say something very important is going on there in Vancouver.
Is there any flexibility on when? Or I have to be there on a certain day?
In a month.
In a month. Maybe get there ahead of time so that you're not like risking that.
Exactly. You see this? Our mind is capable enough to find out how we can do something in ample of different ways. Considered that you know where you're going.
Mm-hmm.
Many leaders, they don't know where they're going.
Yes, that I agree with.
The goal is not clear. Once the goal is clear, if plan A is not working, plan B comes in. Plan B is not working, plan C comes in. C is not working, D comes in. And after D, you call your employees and you sit with them and say, 4 plans of mine didn't work. Tell me what will work.
Right.
Because our mind is, you had 4 plans. Maybe I have 4 different plans to go to Vancouver.
It's interesting you say that, Nitin, because it makes me think about this concept of Jim Collins, who wrote Good to Great, when he talked about the genius of and, which is this idea that it doesn't have to be one thing, like a plane, the obvious one that I said, or a train, or an automobile. It could be a different way of looking at it. It could be this and this. It could be two opposing ideas. One is getting there early, and one is getting there the day you need to get there and risking it. It's very interesting. That's a great example. And I would also say I agree with you that leaders struggle with it. And by the way, I understand why. This isn't a criticism. I've been a leader and I have not been perfect either in my career. Leaders are very busy. They have a lot. We ask a lot of leaders. We ask a lot of employees. We ask a lot of leaders. And so this notion that you're saying about having multiple plans is ideal, and I also think is reasonable, but it's difficult. And you've got to, again, make that commitment. And we get caught up being in the busyness of the day, the busyness of business, that we forget that we can do this and we could do this.
And our employees can have better plans than us.
Yes, they
can
absolutely can. And we forget that. You know, I worked for a company that had manufacturing, and they were struggling with some quality issues. And they brought in consultants and spent millions of dollars to try to figure out what the issue was. And by the time I joined the company, I partnered with HR and we did our own little investigation. And what we found out was many of the same things that the consultants found out. But we also found out that one of the key issues was that many employees, particularly those in other countries, even though the materials have been translated, many employees didn't understand the SOPs. There were these big binders with step-by-step to produce these products, and many of them didn't understand it. Which begs the question, when they were first developed, did we go to the employees and say, hey Nitin, you're on the front line making this product, we've created this binder for you to follow, could you read it and tell me if it makes sense for you? Would you like us to make some changes, the way we organized it or categorized it or write it out and explain it? But we don't. We have people who are developing the SOPs 10,000, 20,000 miles away in a boardroom who then hand them out to people around the world and say, here they are, go and follow them.
Again.
Employees, to your point.
Connection.
Ask them. Often the people who are doing the work, who are closest to the work, have the best ideas about how to make things faster, more efficient, cheaper. Pick your adjective. They often are the ones who are least paid and most junior, but we forget that they've got the ideas. They know their work environment better than we do. So to your point, why not just ask them? Hey folks, how can we get better? How can we support you?
Comes back to 4 pillars: connection, culture, and everything.
Communication,
Values.
leadership, behavior. It's all connected. It's all connected.
I'd say being a leader is like being a president of a country.
Yes.
And having all the ministries on your name.
Absolutely.
You are the Minister of Economy, you are External Minister, you are the Railway Minister, you are the Communication Minister, everything, you are one.
Yes. And what have you done? Not dissimilar from a private enterprise. You've just surrounded yourself by great talent.
Yes.
And you have individual ministers leading ministries who have staffs who are experts.
Mm-hmm.
And you empower them to make the best decisions they can based on the information they have. And that's how you lead.
Great. Thank you very much, Jordan, for being here. One of the very few podcasts which I think people will benefit in leadership point of view, entrepreneurship point of view, and they might make some difference in their companies, and will bless us for this.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you very much for being at the Mug Talks. It was an honor to have you.
Thank you.